Hello and welcome back to the DownSized. This is the channel where we talk about all things related to GLP-1 weight loss and weight loss medications. My name is Lorraine Durham, and I've lost over 50 pounds on compounded tirzepatide. That's the same medicine as what's in Manjaro and Zepbound. And today I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Alexandra Sowa. Dr. Sowa has over 10 years of practice as a clinical instructor at the NYU School of Medicine. She has developed a profound understanding of the biology of obesity and how to treat it with tools like GLP-1 agonists medications. Her extensive experience and continual research in the field have made her an expert regularly sought out by major media outlets, including CNN, CBS News, and the New York Times. She has a new book out titled The Ozempic Revolution. And here, Dr. Sowa shares the ins and outs of GLP-1 medications, separates the truth from the hype, and empowers readers to change their lives with the help of GLP-1s and her So Well method. So we've got some really exciting things here to share with you today. And before we get started, I hope everybody out there will like and subscribe to our channel. And I just want to say that I'm not a doctor, and Dr. Sowa is not your doctor. So please, before you start any medication or weight loss program, please check with your healthcare provider. And now, welcome, Dr. Sowa. Welcome to the DownSized.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So you did a pretty good job. So let me go a little bit beyond that. So yes, I'm
Okay.
an obesity medicine specialist. I started my own very unique practice in New York City in about 2018, where I really got to treat the patient holistically. It wasn't just writing a medication. I never felt great about that. And I knew we needed a lot more nutrition, lifestyle, emotional support than what we were able to give in the traditional doctor's office. And I took that practice online. We were hybrid even before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, we went fully remote. That transition allowed me to really play around with different care models. And that is really where I perfected the knowledge that I give to my patients in the So Well method, and led to me writing the Ozempic Revolution, which is a framework for patients to thrive on these medications. So we'll get more into that. What else can I tell you? I am a mom of four. I have four children ranging from 10 down to 10 months.
Oh,
So I'm a
wow.
little sleep deprived.
Okay. I guess. Yeah.
And what else? I try my best to strength train, and I love reality TV. So
Okay.
that's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. So what got you started with this whole GLP-1 medication?
Well, I've been an obesity medicine doctor for over 10 years. The bulk of my practice has been exclusively in this field. I found the field when it was very, very, very tiny when I was in residency, and I knew that the traditional model of medicine really wasn't for me. I wanted to focus on prevention, and I wanted to reverse disease. I didn't want to just manage it at the very end stages. And that's what a lot of medical education is. So when I found the field of obesity medicine, there was really no looking back for me. I write about this in the book a lot. My reason for doing this stems from my own family. I come from a family of particularly women who carry excess weight. Both of my grandmothers were very overweight toward the end of their life, and they tried everything. This was not for lack of willpower. There was a lot of genetics involved, and they had been put on constant diets their whole life that they're now, in retrospect, I fully understand what happened to them. They restricted so much that their basal metabolic rate was just shot, and there was very little that they could do, and people telling them to try harder, I just ate away at them. And I do this for them. I write about this for them, and I really do wish I had been able to help them. This field would have been around. So that is how I ended up here. And I think I always had great compassion for the person carrying excess weight. In the introduction, we write about how doctors have traditionally failed anyone who carries excess weight. I distinctly remember this was not that long ago. I distinctly remember my colleagues being like, "You want to do what? You want to go into weight care, like obesity? Like You want to deal with, I hate dealing with those people. Isn't
Oh,
that awful? I do
it's a
remember that
stigma.
though.
Mhm.
And I just never felt that way. And I just felt like, oh, there's so much we get to do here. This is thrilling. And
Mm,
I mean, in my opinion, there's no better field in medicine. And I have such happy patients who are so thankful. So I'm just,
that's amazing.
I'm a happy doctor here, just trying to spread the word that we have
That's
things to
amazing.
do now. So
Yeah,
you're,
I love it. I love it that your grandmothers gave you that point of view to view people struggling with obesity as people. A lot of times I think doctors view patients or people with obesity as, oh, well, they have no willpower or those, like you said, those
yeah,
people. So that's great that you come at it looking at the whole person. Have
yeah.
you taken these GLP drugs yourself?
That's a great question. So it's the second time I've
Mhm.
been asked this week, and I've never been asked before.
Oh,
No, I have not,
okay.
because I will tell you, I have been pregnant or breastfeeding for the past
I
10 years,
guess.
almost
I
exclusively. And so
yes, with
that
4
takes
kids.
me out.
Yeah.
Yeah, that takes me out of the running.
Okay,
Um, I had my last baby at almost 41.
okay.
So that's a unique situation to be into. I don't know if I've ever said
Yeah.
that out loud, but it's the truth. And with every baby, it has gotten harder to lose weight. And so remains to be seen whether I will. I lay out a very strong case scenario in the book of when and how and who this is right for. And it goes beyond BMI. But we'll see. There's
Okay.
so many health benefits beyond weight loss now that the use case scenario is continuing to grow.
And I think I saw, in your bio where you've prescribed Ozempic maybe for the past 10 years, like, you're
Mhm.
very familiar
Oh, yeah.
with these drugs and what they do.
Well, so GLP-1s have been around for clinical use since 2005. So I was using them all throughout my training. And then our first FDA approved weight loss drugs were approved over 10 years ago. So I have been using off label and then on label and then a little combination of the both for the last 10 years. The big
Yeah.
difference is that 10 years ago, it was very hard to convince someone to go on these drugs.
Hmm.
There was so much weight stigma and bias and fear about anti-obesity medications that
Yeah.
it's a totally different ballgame. The other big thing that's happened, I think, is twofold. The medications have gotten more efficacious with the weekly
Mhm.
injectables. We've gotten
Mhm.
better at making the GLP-1 hormone to be closer to what it is our body makes. And then there are amazing content creators like you who've been sharing the journey and have been really breaking down the stigma and
Mhm.
creating such great education for patients.
Yeah. Um, I mean, that's great. I think about people who, are just now learning about GLP-1 medications. A lot of people, the first of the year, they get those New Year's resolution and they start typing into their search box, how do I lose weight? And what are these GLP-1 medications? So that's great to know that they've been around for a while.
Mhm.
You've learned about them, you've prescribed them, and that they're becoming more popular and more well known, I guess, in
Mhm.
the treatment of obesity.
They're becoming a lot more popular, a lot more well known. And the thing that I think is really augmenting is that as the literature grows, as the safety profile grows, we are showing that there's so much benefit to these medications beyond
Mhm.
just weight loss.
Yeah.
And we've really there's been a lot of research dollars put behind the medications to show that we do things like reduce cardiovascular disease burden, all cause mortality, um, reduce sleep apnea, osteoarthritis, kidney disease. I mean, now we show that we almost are exclusively preventing progression to type 2 diabetes when on this medication. So the list just grows and grows and grows.
Yeah, and I think that's great because it gives people more access to the medication. It gives insurance companies other reasons to cover these medications where, like my insurance does not cover any weight loss medications at all. So,
Yeah.
but they might cover sleep apnea, you
Right.
know what I mean? Or they might cover it if I had a cardiac issue.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
however we have to get there,
Right. I mean, there's
I'm all
such
for it.
bias against looking at obesity as a disease. So
Yeah.
now it's been great to leapfrog that and to go after the other diseases that obesity is related to and caused by
Mhm.
and worsened by. And let's just go after that because our country has no problem treating those chronic diseases. And I do
Yeah.
think the tide is turning. And I do think insurances in the next few years will be required to cover this as an existing condition, just like anything else.
That would be great. I certainly hope so. Well, let's
Fingers
talk
crossed.
about your book a little bit. The Ozempic Revolution. It just launched, I think, last week. So, tell us a little bit about the book and what you're trying to get across here.
So I think the biggest misconception about these drugs is that you go on them and that it's just a magic wand and there's nothing more to do. And I think a lot of the critics say you're taking the easy way out. It's just a shot. You don't have to do anything. And anybody who's successful on these drugs knows that you do need to put in the work.
Right.
And I realized after treating thousands of patients, there was a real rhythm to how I got them to be the most successful, well beyond
Yeah.
even what was shown in literature. And so I developed this framework, the Sowa method framework, and I've put that into this book. So the core tenet of my practice is education. I want my patients to be informed. I want them to feel very comfortable with what we're doing. I do not want it to just be, here's a script, walk out the door, do what I say.
Yeah.
That never felt right to me. And I don't think we give patients enough credit in medicine.
Yeah.
So the beginning chapters are defining what obesity is. Why is it a disease? Why do we care? And
Mhm.
talking about the science. And I think people love it. It's not too deep, but it's not too superficial either.
Yeah.
Because people can understand it. And I love teaching it to them. And then we
Yeah.
move into the evidence, the science, the myths and misconceptions, the truths of GLP-1s. What can you expect to lose? What's the difference between tirzepatide and semaglutide? What can you anticipate? But then the real benefit to this book is going through the method. And I teach three foundations. The first is habits, the second is nutrition, and the third foundation is mental or thought work. And then we also get into exercise and particular recipes and things like that. But I found that I developed a real cadence to how people needed to change their behaviors. And it wasn't just throwing a handout at them and say, do it all at once. Really moving through the motions. And I lay that out in this book. And we have downloadables and QR codes that take you to worksheets. And so you can go along just as I would in my practice.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So if someone were just starting Ozempic or even maybe, Mounjaro or Zepbound, could they follow your method, buy the book and follow your method?
Yep. And I really have given them everything. I have not held anything back. And I have been getting so many messages from people who are already 6 months, 12 months, 2 years into their journey who are loving it because they're like, huh, I never thought about that. How did you know inside my brain that I was going to be thinking this? I'm like, because everybody thinks they're super unique, but the fact of the matter is there is a pattern to how people think in this journey and how they behave and what they need. And so I kind of laid it all out for them.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of benefit of things we can continue to improve even years into the journey. So it's whether I say it's for people thinking about it, just starting it, having been on it, or love someone who's on it. So practically it's for everyone out there.
Yeah. Well, everyone's certainly talking about, Ozempic and Wegovy and Zepbound these days for sure. Um, oh, if you're interested in buying Dr. Sowa's book, the link to, what am I supposed the link to buy is my brain room. The link to buy her book is in our, description of this video. You can click on it and go right to Amazon if you're interested. I'm certainly, gonna check that out. What is I guess when you see a patient for the first time, like, what's the first thing that you tell them? Like, how would they from someone that doesn't know anything about these drugs, how would they get started?
Oh, in my first visit, I really try and I walk people through this in the book because if your doctor or provider is not doing this, it's kind of like I want you to be thinking about some of these questions too.
Mhm.
So, my first visit, one of the most important things I do with people is ask them about their weight history. So
Mm.
I ask them to draw me a little plot line of like the ups and the downs. And I say,
Yeah.
go back to the very beginning when you first started thinking about weight, right?
Yo-yo
Exactly.
dieting my life, yes.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think that's actually a really important place to start because
Mhm.
a person who never has tried to lose weight once is a little bit different than someone who's tried repeatedly every 3
Mm.
months for the past 40 years and has had
Yeah.
ups and down yo-yos. was dealing with obesity from a very young age, or someone who just put it on in the last 6 months due to a stressor or a medication. It's a little bit different. So I like to know that information. And what's
Mhm.
different about it is expectations. And also, we carry with us the trauma of every failed weight loss attempt. And
Yeah.
so I treat patients with a little bit extra kid gloves when I know they've done it many, many times.
Thank you.
So
Speaking as someone who has failed many times,
yeah,
yeah, thank you, yeah.
yeah, it's a little
That's nice.
different. So, but that's not to say we can't be successful at all,
Right.
as you know.
Yeah.
And then from there, I really think it's important to have a full discussion of risks and benefits
Mhm.
and what we can anticipate from this medication. At the first visit, I can never really tell people how much they can lose, but I always do ask them what their goals are.
Hmm.
And we set out in the book, I tell people you need to establish your why, and your why can't be
Mm.
vanity. Your main why cannot be vanity. It has to be health. So we work through to establish that. And then we really talk about what their goals are. And if they're
Mhm.
totally game with GLP-1s, then great. We can jump in, and assuming that we have this full discussion. And if they're on the fence, we can take a minute. We can
Yeah.
start with the foundations that we lay out in this book,
Mhm.
and I give them all of this kind of knowledge base so that they can kind of make an informed decision. This is not necessarily right for everybody, and that's okay.
Yeah.
About 20% of people in my practice actually aren't on GLP-1 medications. Either they're
Oh.
doing a diet alone,
Mhm.
or they are using another weight management drug. So we have other
Uh,
tools in our toolbox. GLP-1s are the most effective, but not everybody needs them. And I talk about that in this book
hmm.
too, because there might be other medications that could work for you.
Huh, that's interesting. And for those who aren't on a GLP-1 medication, I'm assuming you give them some form of diet. I mean, do
Mhm.
you have a are you portion control? Are you low carb? What is your
So we're an
diet like?
anti-diet practice,
Ah,
and in the Food Foundations part of this book,
uh-huh.
I lay out my core tenets. And I do not give people meal plans. I actually think it's really important for people to be empowered to make their own food choices, because I
That's
could put
great.
you on a restricted eating plan, or I could make your meals for you. I could send you a box of stuff that you need to make. But that to
Yeah,
me isn't very sustainable, because everybody has their own unique taste buds that
right.
do change throughout this journey on a GLP-1 medication. So it's
Mhm.
really important people understand the core tenets. Okay, so what are the core tenets of Food Foundations? Protein.
Ah,
I want patients to hit protein at every single meal. I want them to generally be around a goal of 30. We might need to adjust that up or down depending on where you're starting. Usually it's up where we need to
yeah,
adjust it. I want you to prioritize your protein first. This is very,
first.
very important.
Mhm.
As you know, every diet out there,
Mhm.
traditional dieting really promotes volumetrics of vegetables and fruit.
Mm,
That doesn't bode very well for someone on a GLP-1 medication at the start.
no.
In the book, I give people permission to kind of hold back on the vegetables at first until their hunger
Yeah,
returns down the line,
yeah.
because it will take up important space in your stomach.
It's only so much room in there.
There's only
Yeah.
so much room. So protein first, because that's what you really need to meet your nutritional needs.
Mhm.
I want people focusing on hydration. That's very
Mhm.
key. People do not know that yes, that's very good. I know I saw you drinking it. I was jealous. I didn't grab my Stanley before we sat down. But people don't realize that their thirst sensors are also damped down, not just their appetite. So there's suppression of thirst.
Oh,
So,
really?
yes. So it
Ah.
works the same mechanism in the brain. And so people will be like, I didn't have anything to eat or drink until 2 o'clock. And I'm like, no wonder you
Oh,
don't feel well. Like it's very important.
yeah.
So that's a core tenet. And then core tenet, don't skip meals. And I know that's not
Ah,
very, I don't know, it's not very like trendy in line with a lot of the fasting that's been very popular for the past few years. But I
yeah.
find that people do not meet their nutritional goals and they don't feel great if they skip
Right. I don't think you can get your protein in if you're skipping breakfast. Like,
right.
how if you're going 30, 30, 30, if I'm trying to get to 100 grams of protein, I'm never gonna get there if I don't eat breakfast.
Right.
That's
Right.
my personal
No, it's true. And I'm a big fan of protein shakes in the morning, because a lot of times
Mhm.
people just, insulin resistance, which is the main driver of the majority of obesity in this country, makes it so that we wake up with high insulin. There's a genetic
Hmm.
component, even after you lose weight. And when people say, I'm just not hungry for breakfast, often you'll see that their hormones are a little off when they wake up. Their insulin is high, their blood
Mhm.
sugar is high. Their body knows that they have the nutrition it needs inside. So they just like
Uh-huh.
don't eat until later.
Huh.
That pushing back of food, though, precipitates and worsens insulin resistance. We talk about this in the book. So I
Huh.
think a protein shake, a low carb protein shake in the morning, even if you don't have a big appetite, is very, very helpful on these meds.
Interesting.
One of the habits that I talk about in the book too, beyond just how to eat, is
Mhm.
how to monitor what you're eating. So I actually am a
Mm.
big fan of food logging, not
Ah,
recording macros or calories. Just
yeah.
write down what you're eating. Make
Hmm.
sure you're eyeballing and making sure you're getting enough protein in, and then making
Mhm.
sure you track how you feel, not just what you're eating. So you know if something doesn't agree with you, or if you're feeling lethargic, or
Oh,
you get a headache. I love a log of
interesting.
life for people. It really helps me troubleshoot what's going on and for them to do it too.
Yeah. Yeah, I've logged, like, my shots and my side effects weekly, and, along with my weight loss, but I've never logged my f how a food made me feel. So that's a really interesting, point, because if I like, we ate, I mean, not for anything, we're talking about weight loss, but we had Domino's pizza for for dinner the
Yeah.
other night, and it hurt. My husband too, I ate a piece of that pizza, and I was just like, "Oh, I feel
Yeah.
terrible, I feel bloated, I feel," and I would need to write that down so I remember,
It's
the next.
true. It's true. People forget. We have
Yeah,
very poor dietary recall and like poor
yeah,
recall in general. And
yeah,
so I do like for people to write it down because they will forget and do it again. But, that's common occurrence. A hyper palatable, like processed carb with grease
yeah.
and fat is generally a recipe for disaster on these meds.
Yeah, I don't know what we were thinking, but it was just quick, it was easy, we didn't wanna cook, like, "What can we get?" And my daughter's like, "How about pizza?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Alright." And then I was like, "Oh."
I bet you could figure out another pizza brand that might be a little bit better.
Well, and, a lot of times we'll buy pizza dough from the store and just make our own, or even make our own pizza dough and I find that's more digestible, but, I mean, that's not something we can have even once a week, it's probably more like a monthly thing
Right.
at best,
Yeah, and you're
but yeah.
allowed, but it's good to write it down because then you won't make that mistake
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love what you said about the, protein and eat your protein first. Do you have guidelines telling people how much protein they should eat in a day?
Mhm. We will go through what ideal protein requirements are, which is different than what our FDA sets forth as the ideal
Mhm,
protein requirements. And when I talk about muscle loss that
mhm,
happens on these medications,
mhm.
um, that gets like a lot of negative attention. We lose muscle as we lose weight, but the one way to really prevent is getting more than adequate protein. Studies have routinely shown that patients who eat up to 3 times the recommended daily intake of protein when they're in a calorie deficit or a weight loss state can actually build muscle as they're losing weight. So,
Really?
mhm,
I mean, I've always heard that you can't I do agree that as you lose weight, you will lose muscle.
yeah, it's fact.
That's just kinda how it goes. But is it possible then to build muscle by eating enough protein and maybe lifting weights as you lose weight? Are those things possible to exist at the same
It
time?
is, and that was the study I was referencing that I talk about in the book.
Yeah.
There are a handful of studies that show this. It's a little hard to get 3 times your daily recommended intake of protein, and
I
then
mean, how
also,
much is 3 times? Is that we're
I mean,
talking
it can be
100 grams,
we could
200 grams?
it depends. I mean, it depends on
Yeah.
the person, but we could be talking up to about 150 to 160,
Oh, wow.
yeah,
That's a lot.
grams of
Yeah.
protein, which is a lot,
Yeah.
and most people can't do it, and most people
Yeah.
can't and shouldn't. That shouldn't necessarily be
Yeah.
a goal. And those studies are also talking about men. So
Ah,
we don't have great data on women in this. So, but like, just back it up. We
yeah.
can build muscle in the weight loss period. and we can minimize loss, is that's more important than anything. It's the
Yeah.
ratio of muscle loss to fat. And the two things that people can do are prioritizing their protein, not just eating a few French fries a day, which I see like glorified on TikTok, but really focusing on your nutrition and getting into the gym to lift heavy weights, or at least do weights to a point of fatigue. And so your
Yeah.
muscles are growing.
Yeah.
This is hard. This is easy to give as advice. It's really
Yeah.
hard for my patients to do. There are, there are good resources that I give in the book. I love people working with a physical trainer at the
Mm.
start of getting back into physical exercise, because for many people carrying excess weight, it has been years. They
Yeah.
are very deconditioned in their muscles, and they need a functional approach to how to lift weights.
Mhm.
And a physical therapist. In many states, you can self-refer now. You don't even need to start with a
Huh.
doctor. And I
That's interesting.
really like that.
People ask me all the time about weightlifting and exercises, and I don't really have advice for them at that point, but that's great,
Yeah, if you
keeping
come over
somebody
to my
in there to look
Instagram
at.
page, Alexandra Sowa MD, I do have a list
Mhm.
of resources for
Ah,
places and people that are doing interesting strength training programs. But
mhm.
if you're the person who just can't get started, to me, that often means you need a little bit of one-on-one help. Physical therapy is a great place to start. Insurance will generally cover an
Huh.
evaluation and some ongoing treatment. And then
Uh-huh.
that physical therapist locally may be able to set you up with a trainer
Your
who is
trainer.
like really good for your situation.
Right.
And that person can teach you how to lift weights.
Ah,
It's because it's really hard. There are very few things that we do in life totally on our own that are that hard. And so I think
yeah.
there's strength in numbers and in friends and going to classes and doing it with other
Yeah.
people.
Well, it also can be intimidating too to go into a gym where everybody's, seems to know what they're doing, and
Totally.
here comes me, I'm reading the machine and like which weight and like I need to move the seat and like can somebody
Totally.
just come around with me and show me what to do? So that's a great that's a great idea. I like that a lot. And going back to protein, I have a question for you. Is there a limit to the number of grams of protein our body can absorb at one meal?
This is a good question. This is like a little bit of a myth out in the world.
Yeah?
Generally, between 30 and 40 is the max at any given meal. So, in
Okay.
order to get higher than 90 grams of protein a day through three traditional meals, you might have to add in a fourth meal or a
Yeah.
protein shake. And that is complicated when you don't have a big appetite. So instead
Yeah.
of focusing on getting huge extreme numbers, which, you know, just hit your 30 grams of protein
Yeah.
per meal. And
30.
that's generally enough of a really good place that will sustain you and really help get you to your goals.
Okay. That's great because people, it's a question that I've had and I've heard other people ask, and I've never really seen it addressed
Yes.
anywhere.
Yes.
I'm a big, Weight Watchers person. I've done Weight Watchers since I was 15, and they recently launched a GLP-1 side, and it was a question I asked in a group Zoom class there, and that person was like, "I don't know, ask your doctor." I was like, "Okay,
Really?
great."
I'm so
I don't know.
curious. What did you think about their pivot, having been a Weight Watchers person your whole life?
I was on, compounded tirzepatide when they did that,
Okay.
and so I loved it, and I hadn't told anyone in my Weight Watchers group that I was on it, and then after they pivoted like that, I announced it, uh, last February, "Oh, I've lost 40 pounds on this GLP-1," and people came at me, like,
Gosh.
I mean, some of the Weight Watchers members, and you have to keep in mind, these people have been maybe doing the
Yeah.
diet and exercise thing, and maybe they're on Lifetime for years, and that's all they know.
Yeah.
So now to think that somebody can, take this
Yeah.
doctor prescribed medication they view as a shortcut, and, it's just really overcoming those beliefs, those
Mhm.
those stigmas with people who have lost weight,
I know.
which I thought was surprising. So, it's definitely the stigmas are definitely still out there, but I keep bringing it up. And some people don't like it, but, it
Yeah.
really works, and I've really found that the more we talk about it, the more we, have books like yours and put it out there in the world that these medications are saving people's lives. I
Yeah.
mean, they just flat out are. So I want to tell people about them. And I'm glad you are too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But yeah, and so I also like what you said about in your core method, you do a lot of mental,
Mhm.
mental work. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I think that the mental foundation, the mental work that needs to go into a long-term weight loss journey is some of the most important, and it's totally abandoned in traditional medical practices. Um, this is not a substitute for therapy. I'll talk about in the book often that as we get toward our weight loss goals, or at the very beginning, I will recognize something in a patient where I'm like, we should be in therapy, or you might even need to work with a psychiatrist about this, right? There's deep seated
Yeah.
trauma or other things going on in your life. But for the majority of patients, what I teach in my practice is a modified cognitive behavioral therapy approach to handling what's in front of us and what's come behind us.
Mhm.
So much of long term weight loss really has to do with managing your brain. So much sabotage happens
Mm.
that, and it happens so routinely that I've been able to call it out. In I think it's chapter 7 of the book, we go through kind of like the journey that I can almost anticipate where the
Yeah.
mental hurdles will come. First, it's
Mhm.
usually at about 10 pounds down. People start to panic. They recognize that number because they've been able to get there before with other diets, but it's the place where they've stumbled repeatedly.
Ah.
And they
Mhm.
start to say, this is not going to be any different. I don't think this is going to work. And they start to talk themselves out of even going forward with it.
Yeah.
And and then 6 months in, maybe 4, 6 months in, people really start to notice your weight loss. Well, then you're going to get a lot of negative comments, and then you'll start to come and you'll bring it back to me. My sister says I'm gonna die. Like
I'm
this
too
has been
skinny.
I'm
Yeah.
too skinny. I'm not eating anymore. I'm no fun. My husband says this is boring. You'll get a lot of that, which you then self internalize. And we have
Yeah.
to create different cognitive scripts. And I prepare people for this about how to
Oh.
respond. How do you think about it? How do you work through your mental hurdles and
Oh,
roadblocks?
I love
Um,
that.
it really is like the big white space, that, and I would say strength training, but this, especially in the doctor's office, it's just not, we don't generally have the time, and people can really help themselves through it with the right foundations. And so I teach that. And then of course, looking out, I call them red flags, like when you stop doing something that was working. I always teach people to prepare for the moments of change, whether that's
Mm.
celebrations or catastrophe or the unknown. Generally, that puts things into a tailspin. The things that were working very well are right
Ah.
there. So I put those out. I tell people, look for these red flags, and it works very well. They'll often say to me, like, Dr. Sowa, I just heard you in my brain. The minute I was not going to do XYZ, I was like, oh, this is me. This is me self-sabotaging. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll
well, I
keep
mean, just
going.
coming through the holidays and being around holiday foods and,
Mhm.
we know what foods are, maybe dangerous for us to consume in a big way, and they're around and we're,
Yeah.
"Oh, but they taste good," and, maybe they don't taste as good as they used to, but I don't have cookies like this all the time, or, maybe you go on a vacation or a cruise and there's all this food and how do you train your brain in your new way of thinking versus, old habits might come back and kick in.
Exactly. And so how do you stay on top of it? And that's one of the reasons that I
Yeah,
do like people to log. I also
mhm,
walk people logging through their emotions and circumstances
yeah,
and just use it as like a journal just for you. It doesn't have to be deep, but it helps
yeah.
us get ahead of things that can really set us back emotionally, physically, and weight wise.
Yeah, I've also noticed sometimes I'll just self-sabotage for no particular reason other than, "Oh, I'm doing really great." I
Yeah.
can have a Reese's cup. Wait,
Yeah.
what's happening? And I don't know if that's related to, stress, or maybe I didn't get enough sleep, or I walked past it in the grocery store and it triggered something in my brain. But yeah, I could definitely see where journaling those feelings and those times of day and all that would be helpful.
What I talk about is finding the trigger for those things. And often, if we
Mhm.
take some time, you can go back and think about it. Just like you were
Mhm.
like, I don't know if it was XYZ. Often there's a
Mhm.
pattern to behaviors like that. And there's nothing
Mm.
wrong with a Reese's peanut butter cup. There really isn't. That's not the point here. But when you feel like something keeps happening and it has
Yeah.
control over you and you don't have control over it, then
Yeah.
we need to work on that, because I want you to be able to enjoy that Reese's peanut butter cup without any shame.
Right, right. And I should be able to enjoy, I call them fun foods. Enjoy fun foods every once in a while because I don't want to think of food as good or bad, but
Right.
some are definitely going to fuel my body better than others.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And journaling helps with that.
Yeah. I'm definitely buying the book. It sounds like it was made for me. And it's so interesting how you say, there's patterns
Mhm.
because people think, and I've noticed this in talking to people too and doing this YouTube channel that, we think that we're the only ones that hear this food noise. We think we're the only ones who
Yeah.
grew up being traumatized by our weight. We have so many uh, things in common with people who have this disease of obesity. And it's so great to, you know, talk to a doctor who says obesity is a disease. And now here's not a cure for it, but a tool, these
Mhm.
GLP-1s that can help you. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just amazing. The whole thing. I'm amazed. I'm still amazed. A year and a half in, I'm still amazed. And let me ask you a question about maintenance.
Mhm.
So, I've gotten to my goal weight. I've been maintaining this weight for about 6 months, and I continue to take my shot of compounded tirzepatide weekly. I've gone down in dose. I've stepped down from 2.5 to 10 to 7.5 is where I am. What is your advice for maintenance? Is it, everybody's different and you have to figure it out, or should I be aiming for a every 2 weeks, every month shot? What's your feeling on that?
I think it's very individual. I
Mhm,
do have people stay at their goal weight for a period of time between 3 and 6 months at any
mhm.
given dose. And if they are so inclined, we can start to peel back the medication. But that's not what the science shows us. I will say that the science shows us that generally we need to stay at the dose that we got to get to our
Huh,
maintenance dose.
interesting.
Um, and we don't necessarily need to feel a need to taper down. And I actually see that
Oh,
misconception a lot in medicine. I was like, well, you got to where you wanted to go, so it's time to
yeah,
stop or it's time to taper
yeah,
down. And I think a patient, after an informed discussion, we can always try. And if
mhm.
it doesn't work, then we can go back up. And that's
Wow.
really that it really should be the approach.
Uh-huh.
Often when big lifestyle changes have happened, strength training has happened, we are able to come down. For the
Hmm,
majority of people who've carried weight for a long time, more than just a few months to a year, or there was some precipitating event, they will generally need to stay on some level of the medication indefinitely, just like
mhm.
any other chronic disease treatment.
Right.
The patients in my practice who are able to come off are the ones who have had an inciting event. They were normal lean weight for the majority of their life, and there was something quick that happened, and we kind of take it
Yeah,
off quickly and we're able to come off. They were on a medication, a medical treatment, maybe even a
yeah.
pregnancy that just they put on
Pregnancy.
so much weight.
Mhm.
So it's just very unique. And I think
Yeah,
that you have to push back against doctors telling you that it's time to get off of it, because that is just
yeah.
recipe for disaster.
I mean, I definitely feel like I will need to stay on some form of a GLP-1 as long for life, as long as I wanna maintain this weight loss.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting what you said that, eh, you could stay on your dose where you got to where you lost your weight. So for me, that dose would be 12.5. And everything that I heard was like, "Oh, now you can start stepping back, and now maybe you can start spreading out your dose, maybe every 2 weeks or every month." And it's almost like people have a not a moral superiority, because I don't wanna put that stigma
Oh,
on
yes,
people who
they
have lost,
do. I'll say it
but
for you.
I'm microdosing, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I could ever microdose. Like, I don't want a micro, like if I go below 7.5, I tried to do 5 milligrams and I was hungry.
See,
Like,
and that was your signal. So you've
yeah,
kind of done, yes. No, yes, it is a moral superiority. It is, I know better than the drug trials. I know better than the medicine. I know
yeah,
better than what science tells us. And I'm going to convince you that you should be on some super low dose because that makes me a guru. I've gone on record
yeah,
saying that this is the only people that come to me with this concept of microdosing. And I will tell you, obesity medicine doctors like myself in specific use case scenarios will sometimes have to change up dosing structures. But as a whole, these drugs were trialed in microdosing. They didn't work.
uh,
We put forth FDA approved dosages based on what actually works, right? There's no point in taking a medicine if it doesn't work. So
right.
I get really, I've been quoted many times in many newspapers saying that this is really this is hidden weight stigma when people are telling you, trying to convince you to go on a lesser dose, like somehow it makes them better because they do better at a
Right.
lesser dose.
Yeah. Well, and I've almost been thinking I should go back up to 10 because I almost feel like I've gotten so used to now 7.5 being on it for about 6 months that I can out eat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Okay, I will tell you this. We talk about this in the book. There's an outstanding study that is not reported on enough that shows actually what happens when your hunger returns. So we
mm,
do know that between 5 to 12 months on any given dose, hunger comes back.
oh,
But that doesn't necessarily mean weight comes back. You are still able to control what you eat, even though your cravings
yeah,
are back, your
yeah,
hunger's back, and then you do have things like food noise, but the
yeah.
medication's still working. People panic that it's not working. I would say
Right.
follow the scale. Follow the
Okay.
scale.
Yeah.
And that would be the thing that I would look at to see if it's time to go up. Hunger is
Yeah.
not the enemy. Hunger that you
Right.
really can't control, or you're doing all the things and it's coming back
Yeah.
on, well, then that's a case.
Yeah. Because I wanna be hungry at meal times.
Yeah,
I think that's good. I think that's appropriate to be hungry for a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner. I don't seem to be hungry for snacks or care about snacks anymore,
good.
which is weird because I was a eating all the time
Right.
person. And I also have wondered now, being on maintenance for these months, is it still working? You know what I mean? Because I know that I'm still taking my shot every week. I know that I have the levels in my body, but it wasn't like the first time I took the 2.5 dose and was like, "Oh, I can't eat
Right.
anything."
Right.
So, and the follow the scale advice is good. So I think if my weight does trend up, I know that I can
Right.
dose up if
And
I
that's the
need
first
to.
rule in my book, is that you have to start to become comfortable with the scale and become emotionally neutral about it. It is our best guide in this
Mm,
process.
so
And I
hard.
give like super, this is the mental game. This is the mental work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have to rewrite the script in our relationship with the scale.
Yeah, it's so hard because 'cause I'm a daily weigher.
I like it
Yeah,
too.
and nobody's ever gonna talk me out of weighing myself once a day. Like, Weight Watchers says, "Once a week is fine." I'm like, "Oh, no, because I could be up
Right.
5 pounds in a week. I could be out of control before I know it." So, but just to get used to the feeling that that scale isn't judging me or isn't telling me I'm a bad person or isn't setting the tone for my day based on the number that I see on this little black box on my floor, like,
Right.
when for so many years, for my whole life, I've kinda lived and died by those numbers, so it's very hard to
I know,
separate
it's
from
hard,
that.
it's hard.
Yeah.
This is the element of kind of being in touch with how you're feeling and
Yeah.
reminding yourself, this is just a journey. This is just a journey. This is just part of the process. This does not
Yeah.
have any determination of my worth, of my beauty, of my success, of my ability to do this. It's just a tool. It's hard.
Mm.
It's hard and
Yeah.
does take constant attention.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I could chat with you all day. Yes, thank you so much. I hope you guys will go buy Dr. Sowa's book, The Ozempic Revolution. It's available on our Amazon store. It's available on Amazon. There's a link in the description where you can just click right through and buy it right now as soon as we're done with this interview. Thank you, Dr. Sowa. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, and I hope everybody out there will like to the downsized. and leave us a comment in the comments. If you have a comment for Dr. Sowa, let her know what you think. But thank you very much, Dr. Sowa. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for all the
Yeah.
important work you're doing too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been a great journey. So thanks for watching out there. And my name is Lorraine Durham, and this is The Downsized. We'll see you next time. Thank you.